Hello, DCA English 3 students. Here we go. The Enlightenment in 10 minutes or less. Can he do it? Let's see. This is a recap of our notes on the Enlightenment, otherwise known as the 18th century, sometimes called the Age of Reason. It ran from about the 1660s to the 1810s. Nobody woke up on a specific day in a specific year and said, let's have an Enlightenment, so it's kind of an approximation. So this is the period of time that came after the Puritans, otherwise known as the Renaissance period, if you wish. During the Renaissance, however, before we get to an Enlightenment, people like Francis Bacon, who wrote The Advancement of Learning, are beginning to argue that for a new way of determining scientific facts. We know it as experimentation. Should have another quotation mark on the end of that, through direct observation. So he was studying things by observing them, by trying things out, rather than just reading what some ancient guy who's been dead for centuries said was scientific truth. He decided to try it out. He actually died by trying an experiment involving freezing chicken. Put the chickens in a snowbank to see if the meat would be preserved. Turns out it is. That's how we get chicken nuggets. But he died. He got pneumonia. So Bacon died freezing chicken. It's kind of sad. But he gave us the nugget, and so thank you, Francis Bacon. Later, a little bit later, Galileo, or around the same time, I should say, Galileo was challenging the wisdom of ancient writers like Aristotle. Remember in class we talked about the fact that he climbed up the Tower of Pisa, dropped 2 rocks. One was really heavy, one was kind of lightweight, all the way down, and demonstrated over and over and over again that the 2 rocks, no matter whether they're big or small, they fall at the same rate. 32 feet per second is the velocity. That's how fast things fall to Earth, because that's the gravitational pull. And it has nothing to do with the weight of an item. It simply has to do with the fact that the gravitational pull is doing that. Okay, but guys like Aristotle back in the in the ancient days before Christ were saying, no, the heavier object would fall faster. He never really tried it out, or he would have known better. Galileo said, I don't trust this Aristotle dude. Who's he? I'm going to go drop him off and see what happens. Lo and behold, Aristotle was wrong. Galileo proved that that he was wrong. Now, soon people began to get interested in scientific investigation, and the people who were interested started to form a club or a society. And in London, this was called the Royal Society, which was started in 1662. And that allowed people who were kind of off doing experiments on their own and scientific observations on their own, things like the circulation of the blood or other biological things, natural chemical things, physical things, astronomical things. They would come to the Royal Society and they would share what they found. They would give their papers to people. They would give lectures, and it was just kind of a society for the mutual improvement of scientific knowledge and share what they discovered. One of the chief guys involved in this whole thing is a guy named Sir Isaac Newton. You know him as the fellow who allegedly invented the laws of gravity and the laws of thermodynamics and all these kinds of things. We talk about the laws of the physical universe primarily because during the 18th century, a view emerged of the universe as having been governed by these set laws or rules, right? Gravity, all these kinds of things. Like I said, the second law of thermodynamics, all the entropy, right? That the universe is set up, according to the 18th century Enlightenment view, as operating according to certain laws or certain things. And this is where we got into the question of the movement known as deism. Remember deism? It's not on my slide, but I'm going to add it in here. Because the deists believed that the universe was created by a divine creator. They could call him God or the creator, but that he didn't really get involved in human affairs. He just set in motion all these the physical universe with all its laws and didn't bother getting involved with it. Newton was not a deist. Franklin dabbled with deism, as you saw in his text, for a little bit, but ultimately he said, no, I see too much in human affairs to tell me that there is divine intervention. So a deist would be the opposite of a Puritan in some ways, because the Puritans thought that providence governed everything, even minute things. But deists thought, no. God doesn't get involved. He's like this big giant clockmaker. He sets the clock in motion, winds it up, and then sits back and does nothing and watches it go. As we said earlier, some of the founding fathers were very deistic or were outright deists. Jefferson and Washington, for example, were very deistic, if not outright deists. Franklin dabbled with it, but he said, I've seen too much of human history to know that there's a God, yes, and he created the world and he set it up with certain laws and principles that if you follow it, you will prosper. If you go against those laws and principles, you will stub your toe and not be very successful. But I also believe, after seeing what I've seen, that God does get directly involved in human affairs. And he basically said the number one way he knows that is because the American Revolution shouldn't have been something we should have won. There were just too many long odds. God had to be intervened. He said, I saw instances where I know that God intervened in it. Okay. But the view here is that the universe, and Isaac Newton is one of the proponents of it, was an understandable place, a predictable thing. That if you just understand the laws of the universe, then you can predict things. And for many, many years, that has been the way we've looked at the physical universe, that if we just understand the properties, the principles, the elements, the way things work, then we can predict how to build things and cure things and that sort of stuff. Now, additionally, I'll move myself down here away from Ben. We have in the realm of philosophy a guy named John Locke who came up with this idea that has been offhand. We use the phrase tabula rasa. We get it from his essay concerning human understanding in 1689. He comes up with this idea that tabula rasa, that's what we're all born with, a blank slate, that our brains, our minds are essentially like that little blank slate down there, blackboard down there. And what we know at any given point in our lives is simply the sum total of all of our sensory experiences, what we've seen, heard, smelled, tasted, and touched. Now, what does this exclude? It excludes intuition. It excludes some sort of divine spiritual knowledge, right? Which Orthodox Christians believe is the case. It also excludes this idea of knowledge that might be imprinted on you before you're born. We'll talk about that later when we talk about the Romantics, who kind of semi-reject this. But according to Locke and other philosophers like him, Hume and Berkeley and other people who are called empiricists, you don't need to know that, everybody's born pretty much with the same blank slate or blank tablet or blank sheet of paper, and how smart someone is, how successful someone is, has to do with how many experiences they've had, what they've had a chance to learn. So the implication is, from the Enlightenment point of view, is that we can educate anybody to any level if we just catch them young enough and we try. I mean, if everybody's born with the same kind of blank slate, then we can educate everybody equally if we want to, and everybody can rise and everybody can do their best. They can put forward their own effort, and then the people who learn them the most, if we start them off equally and rise to the top, then they deserve to be in leadership positions. Why do we have this royalty thing? There's nothing special about these cats. What in the world? The only reason Prince Charles and all those other royal people have more knowledge is because they have more privilege and they had more opportunity for more education through their experiences, right? If I had been able to go to a private little school where I had all these tutors and stuff, and then went to these wonderful fancy colleges and had exposure to a huge library, well, I'd be that way too. Now, and of course, the prime example of this is Franklin, a guy who didn't have much formal education, but who, through his own determination, created his own education for himself, created his own library and one for everybody else as well, and created, therefore, his own experiences through learning, through knowledge, through direct experience, through his senses, but also through reading about other people's experiences. Now, we'll set aside Dr. Litton's objection that some people seem to be born with bigger slates than others, because I've got a few people I'm related to that I think they got really small slates. But I won't go there. Aggies have a small slate. Arkansans, Hogs, Razorback fans have really big slates. All right, that's my prejudice. I'm sorry. So that is what we learned about in the Enlightenment in a nutshell, in a recap. In under 10 minutes. Go ahead and review some of these ideas because these were the biggies that we covered in class. All right? Thanks very much.